Namaste. Today I'm going to read from The Heart of the Buddha's Teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh about suffering. The name of the chapter is Everything is Suffering. I'm going to read a couple chapters. But first, I love what he says. I want to read this first so you can get into a space. So maybe close your eyes and take a couple deep breaths. These videos don't require you to look at me at all. So if you like to close your eyes and kind of meditate and allow, then it's a nice time to be able to do that. If you're someone that likes to have your eyes open, then you can watch the video, you can watch me read, you can maybe journal or sit there and look out your window, and these words might really suit you. It says, "The gentle spring rain permeates the soil of my soul. A seed that has lain deeply in the earth for many years just smiles." He says, while reading or listening, don't work too hard. Be like the earth. When the rain comes, the earth only has to open herself up to the rain. Allow the rain of the Dharma to come in and penetrate the seeds that are buried deep in your consciousness. A teacher cannot give you the truth. The truth is already in you. You only need to open yourself, body, mind, and heart, so that his or her teachings will penetrate your own seeds of understanding and enlightenment. If you let the words enter you, the soil and the seeds will do the rest of the work. So you let the words enter you and permeate your soil. So this is the question that everybody wonders about when it comes to Buddhism, and I want to reiterate something that Tenzin Robert Thurman talks about often, and also the Dalai Lama. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is that to learn about Buddhism does not mean that you become a Buddhist, right? It's a path, a way of living that helps you to live more fully. It helps you touch happiness and joy. It's the same with the path of yoga, right? We don't think of these things as religion or becoming them, but instead, for a lack of a better word, pursuing the path that we know works. Buddhists and yogis are scientists, and there's thousands of years of proof that these paths work when we practice them and we learn to understand them through our own truth, like he said before. So is everything suffering? If we are not careful in the way we practice, we may have the tendency to make the words of our teacher into a doctrine or an ideology. Since the Buddha said that the first noble truth is suffering, many good students of the Buddha have used their skills to prove that everything on earth is suffering. And it's true until you learn the technique. The theory of the three kinds of suffering was such an attempt. It is not a teaching of the Buddha. The first kind of suffering is the suffering of suffering. Wow. The suffering associated with unpleasant feelings like the pain of a toothache, losing your temper, or feeling too cold on a winter's day. The second is the suffering of composite things. Whatever comes together eventually has to come apart. Therefore, all composite things are described as suffering. Even things that have not yet decayed, such as mountains, rivers, and the sun, are seen to be suffering because they will decay and cause suffering eventually. When you believe that everything composed is suffering, how can you find joy? The third is the suffering associated with change. Our liver may be in good health today, but when we grow old, it will cause us to suffer. There is no point in celebrating joy because sooner or later it will turn into suffering. Suffering is a black cloud that envelops everything. Joy is an illusion. Only suffering is real. For more than 2,000 years, students of Buddhism have been declaring that the Buddha taught that all objects of perception, all physical, table, sun, moon, and physiological phenomena, and all wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral states of mind are suffering. 100 years after the Buddha passed away, practitioners were already repeating the formula. This is suffering, life is suffering, everything is suffering. They thought that to obtain insight into the First Noble Truth, they had to repeat this formula. Some commentators said that without this constant repetition, the Four Noble Truths could not be realized. Today, many people invoke the names of the Buddha or do similar practices mechanically, believing that this will bring them insight and emancipation. They are caught in forms, words, and notions and are not using their intelligence to receive and practice the Dharma. It can be dangerous to practice without using your own intelligence. It can be dangerous to practice without using your own intelligence, without a teacher and friends who can show you the correct ways to practice. Repeating a phrase like life is suffering might help you notice when you're about to become attached to something, but it cannot help you understand the true nature of suffering or reveal the path shown to us by the Buddha. This dialogue is repeated in many sutras. Monks are conditioned things permanent or impermanent. They are impermanent. Monks are conditioned things permanent. Monks, okay, let me repeat that. Monks are conditioned things permanent or impermanent. They are impermanent, world-honored one. If things are impermanent, are they suffering or well-being? They are suffering, world-honored one. If things are suffering, can we say that they are self or belong to self? No, world-honored one. When we read this, we may think that the Buddha is offering a theory. All things are suffering, that we have to prove in our daily life. But in other parts of the same sutras, the Buddha says that he only wants us to recognize suffering when it is present and to recognize joy when suffering is absent. To recognize joy when suffering is absent. By the time the Buddha's discourses were written down, seeing all things as suffering must have been widely practiced, as the above quotation occurs more frequently than the teaching to identify suffering and the path to end suffering. The argument, impermanent, therefore suffering, therefore non-self, is illogical. Of course, if we believe that something is permanent or has a self, we may suffer when we discover that it is impermanent and without a separate self. But in many texts, suffering is regarded as one of the three Dharma seals, along with impermanence and non-self. It is said that all teachings of the Buddha bear the three Dharma seals. To put suffering on the same level as impermanence and non-self is an error. Impermanence and non-self are universal. They are a mark of all things. Suffering is not. It is not difficult to see that a table is impermanent and does not have a separate self of all non-table elements, like wood, rain, sun, furniture maker, and so on. But is it suffering? A table will only make us suffer if we attribute permanence or separateness to it. When we are attached to a certain table, it is not the table that causes us to suffer, it is our attachment. We can agree that anger is impermanent, without a separate self and filled with suffering, but it is strange to talk about a table or a flower as being filled with suffering. The Buddha taught impermanence and non-self, the Buddha taught impermanence and non-self to help us not to be caught in signs. The theory of the three kinds of suffering is an attempt to justify the universalization of suffering. What joy is left in life? We find it in nirvana. In several sutras, the Buddha taught that nirvana, the joy of completely extinguishing our ideas and concepts rather than suffering, is one of the three Dharma seals. That is stated 4 times. in one of the texts, the Samyukta Agama of the Northern Transmission. Quoting from yet another sutra, Nagarjuna listed nirvana as one of the 3 Dharma seals. To me, he says, not me, to me it is much easier to envision a state where there are no obstacles created by concepts than to see all things as suffering. I hope scholars and practitioners will begin to accept the teaching that all things are marked by impermanence, non-self, and nirvana, and not make too great an effort to prove that everything is suffering. Another common misunderstanding of the Buddha's teaching is that all of our suffering is caused by craving. In the discourse on turning the wheel of the Dharma, the Buddha did not say that craving is the cause of suffering, but he said this because craving is the first on the list of afflictions, the kleshas. If we use our intelligence, we can see that craving can be a cause of pain, but other afflictions such as anger, ignorance, suspicion, arrogance, and wrong views can also cause pain and suffering. Ignorance, which gives rise to wrong perceptions, is responsible for much of our pain. To make the sutras shorter and therefore easier to memorize, the first item on a list was often used to present the whole list. The word eyes, for example, is used in many sutras to represent all 6 senses, or all 6 sense organs and forms. It is often used to represent all 5 aggregates, skandhas. If we practice identifying the causes of our suffering, we will see that sometimes it is due to craving and sometimes it is due to other factors. To say life is suffering is too general. To say that craving is the cause of all of our suffering is too simplistic. We need to say the basis for this suffering is such and such an affliction, and then call it by its true name. If we have a stomach ache, we need to call it a stomach ache. If we have a headache, we need to call it a headache. How else will we find the cause of our suffering and the way to heal ourselves? It is true that the Buddha taught the truth of suffering, but he also taught the truth of dwelling happily in things as they are. Let me see if I can read. The Drishta Dharma Sukha Viharan. To succeed in the practice, we must stop trying to prove that everything is suffering. In fact, we must stop trying to prove anything. If we touch the truth of suffering with our mindfulness, we will be able to recognize and identify our specific suffering, its specific causes, and the way to remove those causes and end our suffering. The next chapter, chapter 6, stopping, calming, resting, healing. Buddhist meditation has 2 aspects, shamatha and vipassana. We tend to stress the importance of vipassana, looking deeply. That's what that means. Looking deeply, that can bring us insight and liberate us from suffering and afflictions. But the practice of stopping, is shamatha, is fundamental. If we cannot stop, we cannot have insight. I'm going to just stop here for one moment and say, and this might cause you to go back and re-listen to what I just read, but listening for yourself, right, as a way to implement, as a way to integrate this into your being and your practices, right, instead of like this broad information or something that doesn't pertain to you, because we're talking about the Buddha and Thich Nhat Hanh, a great Zen master, is presenting this information. It's meant to be taken in. It's very easy to listen and see it as like something that's kind of outside of ourselves, but take it within. Take the information within and allow it to settle on your soil. Let it permeate your soil. There is a story in Zen circles about a man and a horse. The horse is galloping quickly, and it appears that the man on the horse is going somewhere important. Another man standing alongside the road shouts, "Where are you going?" And the first man replies, "I don't know. Ask the horse." This is also our story. We are riding a horse. We don't know where we are going. We can't stop. The horse is our habit energy pulling us along, and we are powerless. We are always running, and it has become a habit. We struggle all the time, even during our sleep. We are at war within ourselves, and we can easily start a war with others. We have to learn the art of stopping our thinking, our habit energies, our forgetfulness, the strong emotions that rule us. When an emotion rushes through us like a storm, we have no peace. We turn on the TV, and then we turn it off. We pick up a phone, a book, then we put it down. How can we stop this state of agitation? How can we stop our fear, despair, anger, and craving? We can stop by practicing mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful smiling, and deep looking in order to understand. When we are mindful, touching deeply the present moment, the fruits are always understanding, acceptance, love, and the desire to relieve suffering and bring joy. But our habit energies are often stronger than our volition. We say and do things we don't want to, and afterwards we regret it. And remember, big and small levels. This doesn't always have to be huge. It is as well, but the small things, the small habits, we make ourselves and others suffer. We bring about a lot of damage. We may vow not to do it again, but we do it again. Why? Because our habit energies push us. We need the energy of mindfulness to recognize and be present with our habit energy in order to stop this course of destruction. With mindfulness, we have the capacity to recognize the habit energy every time it manifests. Hello, my habit energy. I know you are there. If we just smile to it, it will lose much of its strength. Mindfulness is the energy that allows us to recognize our habit energy and prevent it from dominating us. Forgetfulness is the opposite. We drink a cup of tea, but we do not know we are drinking a cup of tea. We sit with the person we love, but we don't know that she is there, especially with our phones. We walk, but we are not really walking. We are someplace else, thinking about the past or the future. The horse of our habit energy is carrying us along, and we are its captive. We need to stop our horse and reclaim our liberty. We need to shine the light of mindfulness on everything we do, so the darkness of forgetfulness will disappear. The first function of meditation, shamatha, is to stop. The second function of shamatha is calming. When we have a strong emotion, we know it can be dangerous to act, but we don't have the strength to clarify or clarity to refrain. We have to learn the art of breathing in and out, stopping our activities, calming our emotions. We have to learn to become solid and stable like an oak tree and not be blown from side to side by the storm. The Buddha taught many techniques to help us calm our body and mind and look deeply at them. They can be summarized in 5 stages. 1, recognition. If we are angry, we say, I know that anger is in me. Acceptance. When we are angry, we do not deny it. We accept what is present. 3, embracing. We hold our anger in our arms like a mother holding her crying baby. Our mindfulness embraces our emotion, and this alone can calm our anger and ourselves. Looking deeply. When we are calm enough, we can look deeply to understand what has brought this anger to be, what is causing our baby's discomfort. 5 is insight. The fruit of looking deeply is understanding the many causes and conditions, primary and secondary, that have brought about our anger, that are causing our baby to cry. Perhaps our baby is hungry. Perhaps his diaper pin is piercing his skin. Our anger was triggered when our friend spoke to us meanly, and suddenly we remember that he was not at his best today because his father is dying. We reflect like this until we have some insights into what has caused our suffering. With insight, we know what to do and what not to do to change the situation. After calming, the third function of Shamanta is resting. Suppose someone standing alongside a river throws a pebble in the air and it falls down into the river. The pebble allows itself to sink in slowly and reach the bed of the river without any effort. Once the pebble is at the bottom, it continues to rest, allowing the water to pass by. When we practice sitting meditation, we can allow ourselves to rest just like the pebble. We can allow ourselves to sink naturally into the position of sitting, resting without effort. We have to learn the art of resting. Allow our body and mind to rest. If we have wounds in our body or our mind, we have to rest so they can heal themselves. Calming allows us to rest, and resting is a precondition for healing. When animals in the forest get wounded, they find a place to lie down and they rest completely for many days. They do not think about food or anything else. They just rest. They get the healing they need. When we humans get sick, we just worry. We look for doctors and medicine, but we don't stop. Even when we go to the beach or the mountains for a vacation, we don't rest and we come back more tired than before. We have to learn to rest. Lying down is not the only position for resting. During sitting or walking meditation, we can rest very well. Meditation does not have to be hard labor. Just allow your body and mind to rest like an animal in the forest. Don't struggle. There's no need to attain anything. I am writing a book, but I am not struggling. I am resting also. Please read in a joyful yet please read in a joyful yet restful way. The Buddha said, "My dharma is the practice of non-practice." Practice in a way that does not tire you, but gives your body, emotions, and consciousness a chance to rest. Our body and mind have the capacity to heal themselves if we allow them to rest. Stopping, calming, and resting are preconditions for healing. If we cannot stop, the course of our destruction will just continue. The world needs healing. Individuals, communities, and nations need healing. How does that sit with you? The notion of resting, and that we don't need to view everything constantly as suffering, but to remember that joy exists, and that resting, stopping, calming, breathing. He's not saying don't do your activities, but do them differently, right? Slow down, connect with your breath, be present, be mindful. Thank you for hanging out with me, and feel free to chat in the comments and share this with whoever you think might enjoy it or benefit from it. Namaste.